a little over half an hour, so we will go right on through. If you have questions, let's see, I think I have everybody unmuted that I can, but if you didn't enter your PIN or you're listening on the computer, I, of course, won't be able to talk to you. So leave me a question in the panel or just in the chat box, and it should flag me. All right, here we go. All changes take effect October 1st. That was this past Sunday. Like all the data standards changes that come every single year, they take effect October 1st always. And you do not have to go back to clients served before October 1st and make any changes. There are a few changes, very simple ones that impact all programs. And then there are some more in-depth changes that impact permanent housing providers. That does include permanent supportive housing. It includes like single room occupancy, like the YMCA, and it includes all of the rapid rehousing and rental assistance programs, regardless of their funding stream. So for general things that impact everyone, there was a change to the gender dropdown. In 2016, the gender dropdown included transgender male to female, transgender female to male, and it doesn't identify as male, female, or transgender. They've updated the language around those three options this year. Now it is trans female, MTF, or male to female, trans male, FTM, or female to male, and gender non-conforming, i.e. not exclusively male or female. And that is what it looks like on your screen as of Sunday. Once you get into the entry-exit tab for assessments, you'll want to confirm that you're working off of the 2017 assessments. They all have 2017 and York after their rather lengthy description. The SOESSH entry assessment, of course, is for street outreach, emergency shelter, and safe haven. Really just emergency shelters in York County. Our only street outreach is through PATH, and they have their own assessments. And then for all other projects, all your permanent housing, your transitional, all those things, use the entry, all other projects. The update is for recording housing move-in date, which we will talk about in a little bit. And update is also used for your annual assessment. And then, of course, the exit assessment is for when folks leave a program. Another change that they've had within all of the programming that works with HMIS is under destination. There was never a really good way to identify when people were leaving programs because they were receiving rapid rehousing assistance or because they were going to permanent housing, something you'd think of as site-based, something that might be a permanent supportive housing program, for example, or shelter plus care. So what they've done here is they've taken the permanent housing for formerly homeless persons, which is what was on the list for 2016, and they've split it out into two options this year. They revised that one to say permanent housing other than RRH, rapid rehousing, for formerly homeless persons, and then they've added another option, which is rental by client with RRH or equivalent subsidy, which means that anytime someone leaves a program because they are moving into an apartment with a rapid rehousing rental assistance subsidy, you'll need to choose that new option. And there's your two new options on the screen. There is a small revision to the non-cash benefits after you've clicked the HUD verification link in your assessment and you see the list of non-cash benefits. Section 8 public housing or rental assistance and temporary rental assistance were both removed from that list. They were pretty old. They've been on the list for a long time and they weren't really serving the appropriate role on the non-cash benefits tab. So your non-cash benefits tab now is pretty short and looks something like that. There is a change to the disabilities HUD verification as well, and I think everyone will be excited about this change. In 2016, if you went into the HUD verification and you selected a disability for the consumer, you got another pop-up, and it was pretty long, but it was a little confusing because you only had to answer certain questions. Some of the questions on there were only for pass, and I was always telling people just to skip them. So they've taken out some of that confusion. They've removed the question about whether or not there's documentation of the disability. They've removed both pass questions, and they've removed the question about, is the consumer currently receiving services or treatment for their disability? So what that means is the current screen is much shorter, much easier to handle, and really the things you're answering moving forward are yes or no that they have a disability. That's the disability determination line. They'll be answering whether it is expected to be of long continued and indefinite duration and substantially impairs their ability to live independently. And you'll be answering the, is the above condition going to be long-term? And that's it. So they've removed all that other stuff that was really just causing a lot of confusion for people. So that's it for changes that impact everybody. There weren't a lot of them this year. Permanent housing people, though, do have some changes that I don't personally feel are all that challenging, but I'm certainly not a housing provider. So if this is something you're having trouble with, let me know, and I will try to get you an answer on what to do. So through 2016, we had a very basic entry date, and I told everyone, you know, put the date that they enter your program, put the date that they enter your program. And in the assessments, there was a residential move-in date required for anybody. So moving forward, there is still the entry date. However, the definition of entry date has changed, and residential move-in date has become housing move-in date, and they are both required responses for permanent housing providers. So what that means is that moving forward, your entry date is the date the person was admitted to the program. HUD has defined admittance, and it is different than I think what most people have done in the past. So the date a person is admitted to your program is defined as the date that information from the consumer or from the referral source indicates that the person meets the criteria for admission into your program, the date that the consumer has indicated they want to be housed by your program, and that they will be able to access services and housing through your program in a reasonably short amount of time. This third one is really a safeguard from HUD about wait lists. So they're saying that you don't want to enter someone in, don't want to give them an admittance date if they're on some kind of wait list. You want to give them an admittance date when you're moving forward with the process of getting them into your program. And then, of course, the housing move-in date is the date the person actually moves into housing in your program. So things that it is important to note about admittance. Admittance is not the date that you have finally collected all of the necessary documentation, like the homeless verification and income verification and all of those things that are required to enter your program. It's actually the date that you've decided to move forward with intake. So that's probably going to be the biggest change. We're not waiting until we have everything in place. We're saying that your entry date in HMIS moving forward should reflect the day that you've said, okay, I'm going to start the intake process with this person. So another example and a reminder is that information from the consumer or a referral source is enough to qualify a person for your program. So the example I give here is if a program has a chronically homeless requirement, and a consumer identifies themselves as having a disability and they state that they have been homeless for quite some time, that's enough information to start the process of intake for that program. That's enough information to say, okay, it appears this person would be eligible for a chronically homeless program, and that's your admittance date. That's your entry date. So what you might find is that when a referral is made from coordinated entry, the date you start the process of looking into whether or not that person wants to be housed under your program, because of course that's the other piece here, that they want to be housed by your program, that's your admittance date. So it is still listed as an entry date. The screen doesn't look any different. And as a reminder, emergency shelter and transitional housing programs, this is the day the person moves into your program. There's no change for them at all. The only change is for the permanent housing, the permanent supportive housing, and the rapid rehousing folks. For those folks, your entry date is your admittance date. When you're in the assessments, you'll see that housing move-in date is actually at the very bottom. It always has been. I'm not sure why it's so far down, but they've left it there. And for emergency shelter and transitional housing, they do not have to fill that in because their information is recorded at entry date. For permanent housing, permanent supportive housing, and rapid rehousing, this is the first day the person is in their own housing, in their own apartment or house or whatever the situation is. HUD had discussed and they talked about including a field for capturing information when there was no housing move-in date. So because they're starting admittance so early, there are going to be situations where that person doesn't actually move into housing in your program, and HUD talked about trying to capture information on why that was happening, but they couldn't release the question in time for the data standards. So instead, they've encouraged local communities to create their own question and to track that data locally so that the continuum of care and the community have an idea of why people aren't being housed. So there's a lot of text on this screen. I'm going to show you what it says. Because in like 99% of the situations, your entry date and your housing move-in date are going to be different dates, you need to log them differently. In the rare instance that your entry date and your housing move-in date are exactly the same, you can enter housing move-in date on the entry assessment. The question is available there and you may do that. So if the entry date is September 1st of 2017 and by some miracle that is also the day they moved into housing, you can put 9/1/2017 on your entry assessment. However, that does mean that the consumer was referred, completed intake with all the paperwork necessary, and moved into housing on the same day. So I don't really think we're going to see a lot of that. Instead, what you're going to see is an entry date that is, before. So whenever you have an entry date of, let's say, September 1st of 2017, and let's say you have a move-in date of September 15th, you're not going to want to go back in to that entry assessment to add September 15th as the housing move-in date. Instead, you're going to want to complete an update under the interims button on the entry exit tab. You'll click on the interims button, you'll choose update, you'll type in the date they're housed, so in our example, 9/15/2017, and you will click the save and continue button. It will take you into the update assessment where you can scroll to the bottom of the assessment where you see housing move-in date, and you can type in 9/15/2017 and save that update. So that's how you're going to handle the difference between those two. What that looks like is on your entry exit screen, you would find your program. I used York Apartments as my example for this one. And you would find the interims button. It's a little hard to see on your screen, but it actually is supposed to be a piece of paper with checkboxes on it. You'll click on that interims button and a little pop-up comes up for interim reviews. You'll click add interim review, and it will ask you for your interim review type. There's a drop down here, and there are several types. There's 30-day review, 60-day review, 90-day review, 120-day review, an annual assessment, and an update. So you will choose update, You will type in the date that person was housed, and it will take you into the assessment screen. It'll automatically populate the update assessment, and you will scroll to the bottom where you see housing move-in date, and you will type in their housing move-in date and press save and exit. So, of course, this begs the question, what if the consumer never reaches housing? And this is where sort of that extra question that HUD is recommending becomes so important. Because if you leave the housing move-in date blank, inevitably at some point when I'm running data quality reports, I'm going to reach out to you and I'm going to say, why didn't you fill this in? And you're going to say, well, because they never moved in. So to prevent that, I have created a local question here for us to answer that information. So I know that it was left blank on purpose. So what I want you to do is if you enter someone with an admittance date and you start working through the process of doing intake for your program and something happens, I don't even know what, but anything happens that prevents that person from moving into housing in your program. Before you do their exit assessment, I want you to do an update. And I want you to set the update date for the day that you are closing them out of your program. And you'll go down to the bottom where housing move-in date is, and you'll leave it blank. And under that, there is a question that says, reason housing move-in date is blank. It's a drop-down, and you'll choose the reason that you didn't house that person. Once you've done that, you will save the update. You will go into the exit, and you'll exit them from the program. So where I need help, and certainly you can tell me on the call, you can email me later, is I want to make sure the list of reasons that housing didn't happen is comprehensive. So I created the question, and I put a couple of placeholder options in there. They are, did not locate housing by the deadline, ineligible for the program, no showed on program, and data not collected. But I know there are other reasons that housing falls through, and I'd like that list to be comprehensive for everyone. So if you have thoughts on what could be added there, I would appreciate it. This morning, I did a session, and I realized that I should probably have something there about institutions, you know, or hospitalization. So those should probably be included. But anything else, please reach out. And there's no deadline on that. As you start using this process, if you find that you didn't have someone and there's really no good option there for you, just reach out to me and let me know. And I'm happy to add new options there. That's it. Oh. Are there any questions on this new way of doing permanent housing, or any questions overall? Doesn't sound like it. I wasn't sure how it would go over because the training that I received as a system administrator, many communities are struggling with this change in entry and housing move-in. So I was a little worried that maybe I was just simplifying it a little too much. But this morning they didn't have any questions. It doesn't sound like you guys have any questions. So hopefully we're just a really smart community and we can figure this out.
No, I will have to get you a few that we'll need to add to that drop down, but I mean, it looks pretty self-explanatory, really. I mean, you explain things well, and I think I can explain it well enough to my crew here that I think we can help on our end. I will have to set up a meeting, though, with you to go over a few things outside of this realm.
But I don't know how much of this will actually even impact you because you guys are mostly emergency shelter and transitional housing. But yeah, absolutely. I'll take questions.
With the work track, we are starting to look to place guys into finding their apartment or finding housing.
Okay.
So, yeah. So that'll have some impact, hopefully.
Sounds good. All right. Anybody else? we're done here, you will get an email from GoToWebinar. It'll provide you with links to the training. If you have questions moving forward, you can always reach out to me.
All right. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, guys.